We didn't have to clap.
That's okay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to VCF, the podcast. This is something new we're going to be trying out every other week, rather. So just so that people who haven't been able to come can listen to what we talked about in whatever VCF nights we have. So just to introduce ourselves, I'm Lantz. I'm the newest VCF leader.
I'm Alicia, and this is my third year leading VCF.
I'm Mackenzie, and this is my second year on the leadership team.
Okay, so the last 2 weeks we've been going through Acts chapters 1 through 3, and so we're just going to talk about what we learned from our groups that we discussed with. So I think the first thing that really pops into my mind was the idea of the Holy Spirit. Like, what is the Holy Spirit? What does it mean to be filled with the Holy Spirit? And what does it mean to share the Holy Spirit?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question to talk about, Lance. In our group, we talked a little bit about how when we accept Jesus into our own hearts, we have the Holy Spirit living inside of us. And so when the Holy Spirit lives inside of us, it's kind of like having Jesus right in our heart. It's like guiding us. So when you choose, or you might want to sin, for example, the Holy Spirit kind of tells you that might not be a good idea. But also having the Holy Spirit inside your heart means that you want to follow Jesus and you want to do what he says, and it's not all just about, for example, it's all about Alicia. It's about Jesus and following what he has for your life.
Yeah, and I think that is a good point, that it's not about you, despite the fact that it is you being filled. Mm-hmm. Even though the Holy Spirit, I do have a question. Do you think the Holy Spirit works out of, without a human influence?
If the Holy Spirit lives inside of us, it does have, a human influence.
Mm-hmm.
But, God also gave us free will.
Right.
So we can choose if we choose to follow him, we have the Holy Spirit inside of us. But I don't know if I can exactly answer that question, maybe exactly how you want.
Well, we did talk about that a little bit in our group. And basically what we came up with was the story of when the Holy Spirit healed the lame man through Peter. And we just talked about how the Holy Spirit works through people. Mm-hmm. And how when Peter told the man to get up and walk, he could walk. And everyone was amazed, but Peter was telling the bystanders that it wasn't him who healed the lame man. It was the Holy Spirit working through him.
I think it was also kind of interesting what you had said, too, about how the apostles, there was a definite before and after, where before they had the Holy Spirit, the apostles were very
They were scared.
timid. Yeah,
they were scared people. Then once they had the Holy Spirit, they weren't scared anymore, and they had confidence in their faith.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting, because I never noticed that before myself. But if you actually go and read through, it's there's a definite that shifting point. I think the other thing we mainly talked about was kind of all the prophecies that kind of show up throughout these.
Oh, yeah, in Joel.
Yeah, that book.
Yeah.
And even in the first chapter, verse 20, it brings up verses from the book of Psalms as well.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And the apostles or the disciples of Jesus, they would have grown up Jewish, because at that point Jesus hadn't come. Well, I guess he came when they were maybe born, but they didn't know any different. They grew up Jewish. And so as a Jewish person, the Torah and specifically the Old Testament in general was very important. So they would have definitely learned a majority of the Old Testament and tried to memorize it. So it makes sense why they bring it up here in the context, even after Jesus died.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the Old Testament stuff is very relevant Like, and I think you had said that too, Mackenzie, where it's like, was relevant back then, and then it became not relevant, and then as soon as Jesus came, that all became relevant again. Like, it kind of got a new lens on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the prophecy was being fulfilled after Jesus came.
Mm-hmm.
Our group talked a little bit about the Holy Spirit and the implication for like our own situations in our prayers, and how sometimes we don't understand like why, for example, if our friend has cancer, like why Jesus doesn't heal them, for example, but how like even though we don't understand, God still has a plan and a purpose for that, and He can be glorified through that. And just about how like, even in the midst of suffering, we can still pray in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit and ask God to help them, even if we're not getting the exact answer that we want. Like if we want someone to be healed from cancer, God may have a better plan than we have, right? God still answers the prayer, just not in the way we want. So we had a good discussion about that in our small group.
Well, I think that's kind of what happened in the upper room as well, because you think that Jesus' followers were probably like, Jesus, save us now. Like, you got to do it. And then Jesus was like, nah, wait in this room for like a week. And they did, and it ended up actually benefiting a lot more people, because then they could spread out from just a few people and then spread their influence all over the world. So I think that was important.
Well, it's just because they didn't realize that that was God's will for them, and we often don't think about that. We just want things to get done the way we want, or we don't realize that God's way is better. Even if we don't understand it, fulfilling His will is always going to be the best.
Mm-hmm. That kind of loops us back to the beginning of this discussion with the Holy Spirit. So now that we've come full circle, I think that wraps things out. So thanks everyone for listening to the first episode of VCF the podcast. This will be coming out every 2 weeks, every other week. So yeah, listen in.
This Friday, we are having our first fun event of the year. Come to room 202 in the Education Building for some Sundays and pizza and some fun Jeopardy. We hope to see you there.